The crystalline sphere hung in space like a perfect jewel, catching the light from the nearby neutron star and scattering it into 1,000 colors. Inside this massive structure, representatives from 47 different alien species floated in carefully controlled gravity fields. Each delegate positioned themselves according to their species' comfort, some hanging upside down, others spinning slowly, and a few standing on platforms that existed only for them. Dae-Yun Kim stood on solid ground because humans needed it. He wore a simple black suit with a small badge showing Earth's blue marble against the darkness of space. His face remained calm, but his dark eyes watched everything. Next to him, Hana Park held a data tablet, her fingers moving quickly across its surface. As she recorded every word spoken in the chamber, the council had been talking for 6 hours now. 6 long hours of accusations, complaints, and barely hidden insults. Dae-Yun had not spoken once. He simply listened. Counselor Vrax dominated the center of the chamber. The Thulian looked like a giant mantis made of silver metal and hard shell. His voice clicked and buzzed, translated instantly by the devices everyone wore. He gestured with his sharp limbs toward a holographic display that showed human colony ships, human defense stations, and human warships. "Look at this," Vrax said, his voice dripping with disapproval. "The humans have been part of our galactic community for only 12 years. 12 years? Yet they have armed their vessels more heavily than species who have existed among the stars for 10,000 years. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. A delegate from the Forian species, creatures that looked like floating jellyfish made of light, pulsed in agitation. "Our people have filed 17 formal complaints. Human colonies establish weapon platforms around every planet. They build fortresses instead of gardens." Another voice joined in, this one from a Keldan representative. "The Keldans were bear-like beings covered in thick fur. We have observed human behavior closely. They train their young in combat tactics. They study war as if it were art. This is not the way of civilized beings." Dae-Yun felt Hannah tense beside him, but she said nothing. They had prepared for this. They had known this day would come eventually. Elder Quellen floated near the back of the chamber. The Viridian was one of the oldest beings in the council, an amphibious creature whose skin constantly shifted between blue and green. Unlike the others, Quellen had not spoken against humanity. He simply watched with ancient eyes that had seen countless species rise and fall. Vrax continued his presentation, showing statistics and comparisons. Human ships carried 3 times more weapons than the galactic average. Human soldiers trained for 5 times longer than any other species' peacekeepers. Human colonies had defense budgets that exceeded their education and agriculture budgets combined. "We must ask the question that everyone is thinking," Vrax said, his tone growing sharper. "Are the humans the return of the Devourers?" Silence fell across the chamber like a heavy blanket. Even the constantly moving Forians stopped their gentle pulsing. The Devourers were legend, nightmare, ancient history that no one spoke about in polite company. They had been a warrior race that supposedly terrorized the galaxy 50,000 years ago before vanishing completely. "We do not suggest humans are exactly like the Devourers," Vrax added quickly, seeing the shock on various alien faces. "But the pattern is concerning. A species that emerges alone, that develops in isolation, that knows nothing but conflict until they reach the stars. The similarities cannot be ignored." A Hylar delegate spoke up, her crystalline body chiming like bells. "We have lived in peace for 10,000 years. 10,000 years without major war, without conquest, without the horrors our ancestors recorded. This peace came because we chose to be weak where it did not matter, so we could be strong in wisdom and cooperation." "Exactly," Vrax said, seizing on her words. "And now we ask humanity to join us in this wisdom. Ambassador Kim, your people must disarm. We require you to reduce your military fleet by 80%. You must remove weapons from your colony stations. You must stop training your population in combat skills. Do this, and you may remain part of the galactic community. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to impose sanctions." All eyes turned to Dae-Yun. 47 species waited for the human response. The chamber fell so quiet that Dai-Yun could hear the soft hum of the gravity generators. He stood there, perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Hannah glanced at him, wondering if he would finally speak. But Dai-Yun simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and a holographic clock appeared in the air before him. "I request a 48-hour recess," Dai-Yun said. His voice was calm, measured, showing no emotion. "I must consult with Earth before I can respond to the Council's demands." Vrax's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "This is not a negotiation, Ambassador. We are not asking." "Nevertheless," Dai-Yun replied, "I request 48 hours. It is my right under Council procedure." Elder Quellen spoke for the first time, his voice like water flowing over stones. "The human is correct. Under our own laws, he may request time to consult his homeworld. We grant this recess." Vrax looked ready to argue, but the Elder's word carried weight that even the Council head could not ignore. "Very well," he said finally. 48 hours. We will reconvene at this exact time. Do not waste our generosity, Ambassador Kim." Dai-Yun bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that revealed nothing of his thoughts. He turned and walked toward the exit with Hannah following close behind. As they left the chamber, he could feel the weight of dozens of alien gazes on his back. Once they were in the corridor, Hannah finally spoke. "That was bad. Worse than we expected." "Yes," Dai-Yun agreed. He kept walking, his pace steady and unhurried. "What are we going to do?" Dai-Yun glanced at his advisor, and for just a moment something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, but something else entirely. Something that might have been determination mixed with a terrible knowledge. "We tell them the truth," he said quietly. "All of it." The human flagship Indomitable hung in orbit around the Council station like a silent guardian. Its hull was scarred from a dozen conflicts, each mark telling a story of survival. Inside his private quarters, Dai-Yun sat at his desk and stared at the holographic displays floating before him. Data scrolled past in streams of light, 12 years of careful observation compressed into files that could change everything. Captain Minho Lee entered without knocking. The two men had served together for 15 years, long before humanity made first contact. Minho still carried himself like the soldier he had been back when Earth's nations fought each other instead of standing united against the unknown. "You called for me?" Minho asked, taking a seat across from Dai-Yun. "I need you to look at something," Dai-Yun said. He manipulated the holographic controls and a new image appeared between them. It showed a map of the galaxy with countless stars and systems marked in different colors. "Every species in the Council," Dai-Yun explained, pointing at the markers, "was uplifted by someone else. The Thulians were found by the Forians. The Keldans were discovered by the Hylers. Every single civilization in this galaxy reached the stars because an older species came to their planet and gave them technology. Except us," Minho said quietly. "Except us?" Dai-Yun changed the display, showing Earth's timeline. "We split the atom. We walked on our moon. We sent probes beyond our solar system. All of it alone, fighting ourselves every step of the way. When the Council found us, they expected primitives. Instead, they found a species that had nearly destroyed itself 3 times and somehow survived each time." Minho leaned back in his chair, understanding dawning on his face. "That's why they fear us. We learned to reach the stars through conflict instead of cooperation. It's more than that." Dai-Yun pulled up another file, this one marked with the highest security clearance. "Dr. Jiwan Choi has been studying galactic history since we joined the Council. She found something interesting." The door opened again, and Dr. Jiwan Choi entered carrying her own data tablet. She was younger than both men, but her eyes held the intensity of someone who had discovered a terrible truth. She nodded to them both and immediately began speaking. "The galaxy has been at peace for 10,000 years, she said, her voice quick and precise. "But do you know what kind of peace it is? It is the peace of sheep who have forgotten that wolves exist. One have studied 200 major conflicts from Council records. Not one of them shows real military strategy. Not one demonstrates tactical innovation. They do not know how to fight because they have never needed to learn. She pulled up images of ancient battles. Daeyeon and Minho saw ships positioned randomly, attacks that followed predictable patterns, defenses that any human military academy student would recognize as flawed. They call themselves civilized because they do not wage war, Jawan continued. But the truth is simpler and more frightening. They are not peaceful by choice. They are peaceful because they have forgotten how to be anything else. What about the Devourers? Daeyeon asked. Vrax mentioned them today. What do we actually know? Yuan's expression darkened. That is where it gets interesting. The official council records say the Devourers were a warrior race that terrorized the galaxy 50,000 years ago before destroying themselves. But I found older records, fragments of data from species that no longer exist. The truth is different. She displayed an ancient star map showing a region of space marked in red. The Devourers were not conquerors. They were protectors. Every record I can find shows them fighting something, but never each other, never the other species. They were defending the galaxy from something that came from here. She pointed to the red zone. The dark zone, Minho said. The quarantined region. No one is allowed to go there. No one even remembers why it was quarantined, Jiwan said. The Devourers sealed it off 50,000 years ago and then vanished. The assumption has always been that they died in whatever conflict led them to create the barrier. Daeyeon stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Show them the rest, Doctor. Yuan hesitated for only a moment before pulling up the final file. It showed sensor readings from deep space dated 6 months ago. The readings came from the edge of the dark zone, where ancient warning buoys had sat silent for millennia. These buoys are activating, she said quietly. One by one, they are coming online after 50,000 years of silence. And our long-range sensors have detected movement in the dark zone. Something massive is stirring. Something that is heading toward inhabited space. The room fell into heavy silence. Minho stood and walked to the display, studying the data with a tactical eye. How long until it reaches council space? If the pattern continues, Jiwan said, 6 months. Maybe less. And the council does not know, Minho stated rather than asked. We have told no one, Daeyeon confirmed. We discovered this during a classified deep space survey. Only Earth Security Council and the 3 of us in this room know the truth. They will never believe us, Minho said. Vrax already thinks we invented threats to justify our weapons. I know. Daeyeon turned from the window, his face illuminated by the holographic displays. But I have to try. Because if I am right about what is coming, the galaxy is not ready. They have no warriors. They have no generals who understand war. They have no soldiers who know how to die for something greater than themselves. They have us, Minho said simply. They have us, Daeyeon agreed. One species that learned to fight by fighting itself for thousands of years. One species that understands the cost of survival. And we have 48 hours to convince 47 species to trust the very thing they fear most about us. Yuan closed her data tablet. What will you tell them? Daeyeon looked at both of them, his closest allies and friends. Everything. I will show them the sensor data. I will explain about the warning buoys. I will tell them that the Devourers did not destroy themselves, they sacrificed themselves. And then I will say the words that will either save the galaxy or end our place in it. What words? Minho asked. Daeyeon's expression was grim, carrying the weight of decision that would affect billions of lives. I will tell them that it is time for war, and I will offer to teach them how to survive it. The 3 humans stood in the quiet of the ship, surrounded by data that spoke of ancient threats and coming darkness. Outside the window, the stars shone peacefully, unaware of what approached from the depths of forgotten space. 48 hours passed like a held breath. When the council reconvened in the crystalline chamber, there was an expectation in the air. The delegates had positioned themselves as before, floating in their preferred orientations, waiting to hear humanity accept their terms. Counselor Vrax stood at the center, his silver carapace gleaming with satisfaction. Dayan entered the chamber with Hana beside him. He carried no data tablets, no devices, nothing but a small chip in his hand. His face remained calm, but something in his bearing had changed. Where before he had seemed patient and diplomatic, now he carried an urgency that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "Ambassador Kim," Vrax began, his voice clicking with barely contained triumph, "we trust you have consulted with your homeworld. Are you prepared to accept the Council's terms?" "I have consulted with Earth," Dayan replied, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "And I have a question before I respond." Vrax's mandibles twitched in annoyance. "This is not the time for questions. When did the Devourers disappear?" Dayan asked, ignoring the Thulian's protest. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various delegates. "Does anyone here know the exact date? The exact reason?" Confused murmurs spread through the chamber. The Forian delegate pulsed uncertainly. "Ancient history is not relevant to current matters, Ambassador." "I disagree," Dayan said. He held up the chip in his hand. "May I present evidence to the Council?" Elder Qualen spoke before Vrax could object. "He has that right." "Show us your evidence, Ambassador." Dayan inserted the chip into the chamber's central display system. Immediately, the space around them filled with holographic data. Sensor readings, star maps, energy signatures, and most importantly, footage from deep space probes. "This data comes from the edge of the dark zone," Dayan explained. "The quarantined region that has been sealed for 50,000 years. 6 months ago, the ancient warning buoys began activating. We detected movement. The holograms showed the buoys lighting up one by one, a chain reaction spreading across space. Then came the sensor readings showing massive distortions in the fabric of space itself. Something enormous pushing through the darkness toward inhabited systems. Silence fell across the chamber. But it was a different kind of silence than before. This was the silence of dawning horror. "This is impossible," Vrax said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Those buoys were placed by the Devourers. They have been dead for 50,000 years. They placed them as a warning," Dayan said. "Not as monuments to their victory, but as alarms for when the enemy returned. And now those alarms are screaming." A Keldan delegate found her voice. "What enemy? What is coming?" "We do not know exactly," Dayan admitted. "Our probes were destroyed before they could gather detailed information. But we know it is massive, it is moving toward us. And the Devourers considered it dangerous enough to sacrifice their entire civilization trying to stop it." Jiwan's research appeared in the display, showing ancient texts and recovered data. The fragments painted a picture of the Devourers not as conquerors but as guardians, fighting a threat from beyond known space until they were forced to seal it away at the cost of their own existence. "This cannot be real," a Hyler delegate said, her crystalline body chiming with distress. "We have lived in peace for 10,000 years. The Council maintains order. We have evolved beyond such primitive concerns." Dayan turned to face her directly. "You have lived in peace because someone else paid the price for your safety 50,000 years ago. The Devourers bought you 10,000 generations of peace with their blood. And now the bill is coming due." Vrax recovered his composure, his tactical mind working through the implications. "Even if this is true, even if something is coming from the dark zone, we will face it as we have faced all challenges. With diplomacy, with unity, with the strength of our combined civilizations." "How?" Dayan's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "How will you face it, Counselor? With what weapons? With what warriors? With what strategies?" He pulled up the battle records that Jiwan had analyzed, displaying them for all to see. 200 conflicts, none showing any real military sophistication. The delegates watched their own history played back to them, seeing their tactics through new eyes. "You have forgotten how to fight," Dayan said quietly. "All of you. You were uplifted by a peaceful species who were themselves uplifted by peaceful species going back thousands of years. You have lived so long without real war that you do not even remember what war looks like. And humans do? Vrax challenged, though his voice held less conviction than before. Yes, Daeyeon said simply. We come from a world where we fought ourselves for survival. We split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. We reached our moon while our nations aimed missiles at each other. We learned to cooperate only after we nearly destroyed ourselves 3 times. We know war, Counselor. We know it intimately, and we hate it with every fiber of our being. But we know it. Elder Quellen floated forward, his ancient eyes studying the human ambassador. What are you saying, Daeyeon Kim? Daeyeon took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would change everything. I'm saying that the galaxy is in danger. I'm saying that something is coming that will not care about your diplomatic protocols or your peaceful history. I'm saying that you need to learn how to defend yourselves, and you need to learn quickly. And you will teach us? The elder asked. If you will learn, Daeyeon replied. We have been preparing since we detected the first signs. We did not tell you because we knew you would react exactly as you have, with denial and disbelief. But the evidence is here. The threat is real. And we do not have much time. Vrax's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This could still be a trick. A fabrication to justify your military buildup? How do we know you are not manipulating us? You do not, Daeyeon admitted. You have to choose. Either you believe us and prepare, or you do not believe us and face what is coming unprepared. But know this, we will fight regardless of your decision. We did not survive thousands of years of conflict on our own world just to surrender when we finally reached the stars. The chamber erupted in voices. Delegates arguing, questioning, some calling for more investigation, others demanding immediate action. Through it all, Daeyeon stood calmly at the center, waiting. Finally, Elder Quellen raised one webbed hand, and silence returned. The ancient Viridian looked at Daeyeon with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. You spoke of teaching us. What exactly would you teach? Daeyeon's answer was simple, direct, and terrifying in its implications. It is time for war. We will teach you how to fight it, how to survive it, and how to win it. If you are willing to learn. 3 months had passed since Daeyeon spoke those words in the council chamber. 3 months of transformation that left the galaxy barely recognizable. General Hannah Park stood on the observation deck of the joint training facility orbiting the planet Refuge. Below her, representatives from 20 different species practiced maneuvers that their ancestors would have considered impossible. She had been promoted from advisor to commander of the entire joint military force, a responsibility that kept her awake most nights. Through the window, she watched Thulian pilots flying attack patterns in ships retrofitted with human weapons. Their movements were jerky at first, uncertain, but gradually they were finding their rhythm. Captain Minho Lee floated beside her, reviewing the day's training results on his tablet. The Thulians are improving, Minho said. Their reaction time is actually faster than ours. Once they stopped thinking of combat as barbaric and started treating it as another form of coordination, their natural reflexes took over. And the others? Hannah asked. Minho scrolled through more data. Mixed results. The Forians struggle with aggression. Their entire culture is built on harmony and consensus. Asking them to target and destroy feels wrong to them at a fundamental level. The Keldans, on the other hand, have surprised everyone. They are natural soldiers once you frame it as protecting their families. On the training grounds below, instructor Soman Kong was teaching hand-to-hand combat to a group of Thulians. Her voice carried over the speakers, sharp and demanding. Again, you are too slow. The enemy will not wait for you to decide. Move! The Thulians clicked in frustration but obeyed, their sharp limbs moving through the defensive patterns she demonstrated. Soman had been a combat instructor on Earth before joining the Deep Space Forces. Now she was adapting human martial arts to work with bodies that had never been designed for fighting. It is strange, Minho said quietly. We spent 12 years trying to convince them we were not dangerous. Now we spend every day teaching them how to be dangerous like us. It is necessary, Hannah replied, but her voice carried doubt. In another section of the facility, engineers from 30 species worked together in massive workshops. The challenge was immense. Humans had shared their weapon designs freely, but many species could not use them. Forians had no hands to grip triggers. Viridians needed to stay in water environments. Hylers could not interface with standard control systems. The workshops hummed with activity as teams found creative solutions. Thought-controlled weapons for the Forians, submersible combat platforms for the Viridians, crystal-based interfaces for the Hylers. Slowly, impossibly, it was working. Admiral Taijin Yoon coordinated fleet movements from the command ship Unity, a vessel built by combining the best technology from all member species. He stared at the tactical display showing 47 different types of warships trying to move in formation. It was chaos. Fleet coordination is still our biggest problem, he said during the daily strategy meeting. Every species has different ship designs, different propulsion systems, different communication protocols. Getting them to move as one unit is like conducting an orchestra where every instrument plays a different song. Dae-yun, now serving as Secretary General of Galactic Defense, listened to the report with his usual calm expression. But those who knew him could see the strain. He had aged years in these 3 months. What about Elder Quelleneth's suggestion? Taijin pulled up a new tactical display. The Viridians have a natural psychic ability. They can create a mental network that allows instant communication without technological delay. If we can integrate that with our tactical systems, we could coordinate fleet movements faster than any enemy could react to. The problem, Hannah added, is that humans cannot connect to their psychic network. We are, apparently, too loud mentally. Our thoughts are chaotic compared to species that evolved with group minds. But we do not need to connect, Minho said, seeing the solution. We just need the Viridians to relay our commands instantly to the other species. They become our communication backbone. Dae-yun nodded. Test it. We are running out of time. The threat from the dark zone had drawn closer. Long-range probes sent to gather information were destroyed one after another, but each one sent back a little more data before dying. The enemy was not a single entity but a swarm. Billions of individual units moving together with perfect coordination. When reconnaissance drones finally captured clear footage before being consumed, the images sent waves of horror through the council. The creatures were unlike anything in known biology. They seemed part organic, part mechanical, with forms that made no sense to any science the galaxy possessed. And they reproduced by consuming matter, any matter, breaking it down and rebuilding it into more of themselves. Ships, stations, even planets were just resources to them. In an emergency session, Dae-yun laid out the tactical reality. We cannot win through conventional warfare. If we engage them in open battle, they will simply overwhelm us through numbers. We need something else. What else is there? Vrax asked. The Thulian had adapted to his new role as logistics coordinator with surprising skill, though he still struggled with military thinking. The Devourer ruins, Dae-yun said. We need to understand how they fought this enemy before. There must be something we can learn from them. Hannah immediately volunteered to lead an expedition to the Devourer homeworld, a dead planet at the edge of the Dark Zone that had been forbidden territory for 50,000 years. She took a team of researchers and soldiers, knowing that every moment counted. What they found changed everything. The Devourer city stood empty, perfectly preserved by the dry atmosphere. Their architecture spoke of a warrior culture, but also of honor and sacrifice. In the central archives, protected by technology that still functioned after 50 millennia, Hannah's team found the truth. The Devourers had not died fighting the swarm. They had built a weapon, a terrible device that created a rift in space itself, consuming everything within its radius. But the weapon required something unique. It needed sentient beings to operate it. And those operators would be consumed along with the enemy. The Devourers had used it 3 times, sacrificing billions of their own people to stop the swarm's advance. The final use had pushed the swarm back into the dark zone and sealed it there. But it had cost the Devourers their entire species. When Hannah reported her findings, the council fell into shocked silence. The weapon could save them, but someone would have to die to use it. Humanity volunteered immediately. Dae-Yun made the announcement himself. We will operate the weapons. We understand sacrifice for the greater good. It is part of who we are. The other species reacted with horror. Some called it noble, others called it madness. But Dae-Yun stood firm. You do not need to die. You need to live. You need to rebuild after this is over. We will be the spearhead that breaks the enemy's advance. But we need you to be the shield that protects the galaxy once we are gone. Elder Quellen spoke quietly. You would sacrifice your entire species? If necessary, Dae-Yun said. But we will do everything possible to minimize that sacrifice. We will build multiple weapons, use them strategically, make every death count. And we will take as many of the swarm with us as we can. Captain Minho volunteered to lead the first weapon deployment team. When Hannah tried to stop him, he simply smiled. Someone has to show them how it is done. Someone has to prove that sacrifice can have meaning. The preparations intensified. The war began badly. The swarm hit the Outer Rim systems like a tsunami of living metal and hate. Admiral Taijin Yun watched from his command ship as the first defense fleet engaged the enemy. What he saw made his blood run cold. The swarm moved with impossible coordination. Billions of individual creatures acting as one vast organism flowing around defenses, adapting to tactics in real time, consuming everything in their path. The first colony world fell in 18 hours. The second took only 12 by the end of the first week. 3 colonies were gone. Millions of beings consumed, their matter broken down and reformed into more swarm creatures. The galactic fleet retreated system by system, buying time with blood. Morale shattered. Several species spoke openly of fleeing into deep space, abandoning their territory and running. Council meetings devolved into panic and recrimination. Some delegates accused humans of underestimating the threat. Others blamed themselves for not preparing sooner. Dae-Yun stood before the council, his face haggard from sleepless nights, and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. We have nowhere else to go. Earth is here. Our colonies are here. This is our galaxy too, and we will not abandon it. If you want to run, then run. But humanity stands and fights. His words, broadcast across every human ship and colony, became a rallying cry. But it was the response from other species that surprised everyone. Elder Quellen spoke next, his ancient voice firm despite his fear. The Viridians stand with humanity. We have lived too long to die running. One by one, the other species found their courage. The Thulians, the Keldans, even the peaceful Forians declared they would fight. The alliance held not because they believed in victory, but because humanity had shown them that some things were worth dying for. The tide began to turn in small ways. Combined tactics started working. Thulian pilots, paired with human weapons and Viridian psychic coordination, struck at swarm formations with devastating effectiveness. The Keldans proved to be fierce ground troops, defending evacuation points long enough for civilians to escape. Even the Forians found their role, using their light-based abilities to blind swarm sensors and create openings for attacks. System by system, the fleet learned to fight as one. What had been chaos in training became fluid coordination in battle. Different species, different technologies, different ways of thinking, all blending into something new and powerful, but the swarm kept coming. For every victory there were 2 defeats. The mathematics were brutal and simple. At this rate, they would lose. Captain Minho Lee prepared his squadron for the mission they all knew would be their last. 12 ships, each carrying a devourer weapon, each crewed by volunteers who understood they would not return. Minho walked through the hangar bay, shaking hands with his pilots, memorizing their faces. We make this count, he told them quietly. We break their advance. We give the others time. The squadron launched into the heart of the swarm's formation, fighting through waves of enemies to reach the designated coordinates. Minho's voice remained calm on the command channel, directing his pilots, encouraging them, keeping their spirits up even as ship after ship took damage. When they reached the target zone, Minho activated the weapon. The device hummed to life, drawing power from the ship's core and from something else, something that came from the crew themselves. Their life force, their consciousness, feeding into ancient technology designed to tear holes in reality. For Earth, Minho said, his last words transmitted to the fleet. For the galaxy, for everyone who comes after us. The weapon fired. Space itself screamed and tore open, a wound in the universe that consumed everything within 10,000 kilometers. Millions of swarm creatures vanished into the void, pulled into a dimension where matter ceased to exist. The explosion of energy scattered the swarm formation. Creating a gap in their advance, Minho Lee and his entire squadron died in that moment. Their sacrifice measured not in sorrow, but in the millions of lives they saved. Admiral Taijin exploited the opening immediately, pushing the fleet deep into the swarm's weakened formation. Hana Park led ground forces in a desperate defense of the fortress world of Sanctuary, the last inhabited planet before the core worlds. If Sanctuary fell, there would be nothing between the swarm and the heart of galactic civilization. The battle lasted 3 days. Hana fought alongside Keldans, Thulians, and Viridians, holding defensive positions against wave after wave of attacks. She saw Counselor Vrax make his stand at the eastern gate, the former council head who had once feared humanity now giving his life to buy time for evacuation ships. Vrax fell, but the gate held. His sacrifice, like Minho's, bought precious minutes that became hours that became days. On the 4th day, Daeyun made the final decision. 3 more Devourer weapons remained, and he ordered them deployed at the same time. The mathematics were grim. Using all 3 at once would cost thousands of lives, but it might, just might, be enough to break the swarm completely, the weapons activated in perfect synchronization, their effects overlapping and amplifying each other. Elder Quillan coordinated a galaxy-wide psychic pulse at the exact moment of activation, stunning the swarm's coordination for crucial seconds. In those seconds, the combined galactic fleet fired everything they had. Every weapon, every ship, every soldier who could still fight poured their strength into one massive coordinated strike, the swarm's core nexus. The central intelligence that controlled billions of creatures shattered under the assault. Without coordination, the swarm began to fragment. Individual creatures lost cohesion, turned on each other, or simply stopped functioning. The battle was won, but the cost was staggering. 30% of the galactic fleet destroyed. Millions dead across dozens of species. The Devourer weapons had consumed thousands of human volunteers, their names added to a memorial that would stretch for miles. 1 year later, the Galactic Council chamber looked different. It had been rebuilt, redesigned to reflect a new reality. Humanity's seat was no longer at the edge but at the center, equal to all others. A wall of crystal displayed the names of every being who died in the war, from every species. A reminder of what they had won and what it cost. Daeyun addressed the council for the first time since the war ended. His hair had gone completely gray, and his eyes carried a weight that would never fully lift. But his voice remained steady. "We learned something during this war," he said. "We learned that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the willingness to defend what matters. We learned that unity does not mean uniformity. It means different strengths working toward the same goal. We learned that sacrifice has meaning when it protects something worth protecting." The new galactic doctrine was simple: peace through strength, unity through diversity. Human military academies now trained officers from every species. Alien instructors taught at Earth's universities. Technology flowed freely in all directions. The galaxy slept, but it no longer slept unarmed. Watch stations guarded every approach. Defense fleets practiced constantly. The scars of war remained visible on 100 worlds. Deliberate reminders of the price of unpreparedness. General Hana Park stood in a training facility on Earth, teaching the next generation of officers. Students from 20 species listened as she explained tactical principles, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen war and survived it. "We taught them how to fight," she told her students. "They taught us why we fight." Remember both lessons. In his office overlooking Geneva, Dayan stared at the stars through his window. He had resigned from his position as Secretary General, feeling his time had passed. But before leaving office, he recorded one final message to the galaxy. "We came to the stars seeking fellowship," he said into the recorder. "We found fear and distrust. We stayed to prove ourselves worthy of trust. And when darkness came, we stood together because that is what fellowship truly means. We are not perfect. No species is. But together we are strong enough to face whatever comes. And we will never again face the darkness alone." The recording ended. Dayan turned off the device and looked at the photo on his desk. It showed Minho Lee smiling in his pilot uniform, young and alive, before he became a name on a memorial wall. "We did it," Dayan whispered to the photo. "We taught them to survive. And they taught us that we were never as alone as we thought." Outside his window, Earth turned peacefully in space, one world among many, connected now to something larger than itself. The galaxy had learned its lesson in fire and blood. It would not forget.